Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Josh Shipp. Josh Shipp is he's an author, global youth empowerment expert, and acclaimed speaker, a former at-risk foster kid turned youth advocate. He is renowned for his documentary TV series on A&E that followed his groundbreaking work with teens. He's also the author of the national bestseller, The Teen's Guide to World Domination, and was listed on Inc. magazine's 30 under 30 list. My mom's a huge fan.
There you go.
She saw the talk. The every kid is one caring adult away from being a successful person or whatever the title was. But she saw that and she's a huge fan. I'm a huge fan. Josh is a personal friend of mine and just an all around great person. And he's someone who's genuine and he genuinely cares. And he's got a lot to offer and one of the best speakers that I've ever seen. So I'm excited to bring in Josh today. Josh, welcome.
Hey, thank you, good sir. I like that radio voice that you turned on there. That was hey everybody, I'm Chandler Bolt.
All right, brother. Well, let's kick it. Let's go back to the beginning. I want to start there. I know that you've got a lot of writing advice, but then we're especially going to get into the monetizing, the back end, something that you're masterful at, and you just think about in a way that not too many think about it that way. But let's first start with the writing stuff, and let's actually first start by why did you decide to write your first book, and what was the real purpose for that book, and then what was the process of doing that?
Okay, so for me, I initially started my career pretty young. I was like 17, 18, 19 years old, and I was going around giving speeches to high school kids. My story is fairly well known. You can Google it, but the very short version of it is that basically I was kicked out of like 12 different foster homes. By the time I was 14, I was sort of this kid that went through a lot of abuse and neglect, but also I was a kid that had a big chip on my shoulder and was angry and sort of acting out. Had some caring adults step into my life, logged hundreds of hours of counseling, and slowly things began to turn around. And then sort of unintentionally, I became like this kind of success story. Like, hey, this young kid, like he used to be this and drive us crazy. And now he kind of still drives us crazy, but like he's getting his act together. So I was just sort of invited to go and speak at high schools and this and that. And then kind of a couple years into that, when I was doing a lot of speaking, and I was getting paid to speak and speaking on significant stages and these sorts of things, the desire was sort of twofold. And this is kind of how I approach everything. Like it's not just a good deed for me, but it's also not just a commerce thing. Like I want to try to find that balance of doing something that matters and good business and good commerce, so you can do more of the thing that matters. So that's kind of where a book entered in for me, is that number one, I was the business, and the only product that I had for sale was me coming to your school and talking. So I was sort of a one-trick pony on the business side of things. And then also, I don't believe that a 1-hour speech can change anybody's life. I think a 1-hour speech can inspire someone to think maybe they want to change their life, or maybe kind of be a spark or an epiphany, or make them think about things differently or begin to question what they're doing. So also for me, a book was a way of like, hey, these kids are inspired by my story, the things that I share. I want to be able to leave something substantial behind that they can go through, that they can sort of go through with a caring adult that's in their life. Because I'm just like a dude that kind of shows up and then leaves. I'm not going to be there in their life day in, day out. Whereas the book could also paired with a caring adult. So that was kind of the initial motivation to write my first book.
Got it. Now take us through the process behind that. What was the process that you went through for the actual writing of the book? And then maybe what are some things that you've learned and what you would do differently now?
Well, I was an idiot. I mean, I just did it terribly. So I'll touch briefly. I will insult myself briefly just to like make people feel good about themselves. and then I'll tell you like kind of the slightly smarter things that I'm doing now. So back in the day, I thought, I need to go to a cabin by myself and have a glass of tea and then just sit down and write the book. And that's how everyone writes a book. And if you can't do it that way, you're incompetent or incapable. So I tried that, and it was just terrible. If you and I are talking, or if I'm on a stage talking to, a couple hundred kids or a couple thousand kids, I can be myself. I can incorporate my personality, and I can also kind of bring some advice into the fold. But I just found when I sat down to write, it was just terrible and dry. And, to be honest, it reminded me a lot of when I first started speaking, is that I was trying to be a version of someone else. I thought, well, this person's a good writer, so I need to be like the young version of them, or the male version of them, or the short, pale, freckly version of them. And you just try that, and you go, man, this isn't me. I don't feel like my personality's in it. I don't feel like anything that makes me good in this other endeavor is in it. And if my friends or loved ones read this, they would be like, who is this guy? So, you, as a writer, you can have personal guilt over a preconceived idea of how you're supposed to go about writing a book. Which kind of leads to how I go about it now, and how I go about writing a book, how I go about writing our curriculum that we have in a couple thousand schools around the world, is I really think of it more as an assembly line. And I'll kind of lay out the process that works for me, but the message here is that every writer needs to find a way that works for them to get the best content and product down possible. And however your process looks, you shouldn't apologize. You shouldn't have guilt. You shouldn't be comparative about how he does it or she does it. But I want to kind of lay out how I do it, because it might open some minds as to, it doesn't just have to be me. So my process currently, I think of it as an assembly line, is that I have essentially a writing buddy, a guy that I sort of partner with on my books. I give him a net percentage of the sales of the book, and him and I get in a room and we say, so let's say we kind of have the big picture of the book, figured out. I'll say, all right, chapter 1. Here's what we're writing a book right now for parents. So I say, all right, chapter 1 has got to be about how, teens need you more in their life than you expect. And so here's kind of the vision. Here's the idea. Like here are the 3 things we have to say. Like if we don't say these 3 things when we're talking about that topic, it would be a disservice. There you go. And then, so he takes like kind of my big picture idea, those kind of 3 bullet points, and then he's just a wordsmith. The dude just vomits words. It's insane. He can like blink and write 10,000 words, and I'm like crying trying to write 12. So he'll go and write, a couple hundred, a couple thousand words about that idea, about that concept. And for me, I just realized I'm a better visionary and editor than I am sort of a word workhorse. And so then I edit it, give him notes, make sure the voice is appropriate, make sure the advice is spot on. It goes back to him. And then we take it to a focus group. Now, this has been game-changing. I did this with my TED Talk. That thing ended up with 4 million views. We're doing this with this book, and I can tell we're halfway through writing the book. The clarity and the epiphanies that this has brought is insane, because I'm used to being a speaker, which meaning, right, like right now, Chandler's kind of nodding at me, right? So I'm like, okay, he's tracking with me, like he's with me. I'm used to being a speaker, so meaning I can read my audience. So I can know, like, if I'm saying something and I don't see them nodding or leaning in or taking a note, like, I've lost them, like I've confused them, or I'm not on point. So you can adapt. But with a book, I think you have to approach it soberly in knowing that you're not going to have that ability to read the room and adapt in real time. So I put together, and I don't think the size of the focus group matters, but I put together a focus group of 75 of our potential readers. So the particular book I'm talking about right now is focused parents, teachers, caring adults. That's who the book is for. So we put together a focus group comprised of those three types of people. Some of them are like, followers of mine on Twitter. Some of those are personal friends that are teachers. Some of those are random people once removed of like, hey, a teacher's in our focus group. And I said, would you get a couple other people to help out? This has been game changing. In that, we will, in a Google Doc, just spoon feed a small slice of the book to this focus group. Okay, so we don't overwhelm them with like, here's 800 pages. How can we make it better? But we spoon feed them just an appetizer, just a little piece of the book. And then we just simply ask them the question, go through this in the Google Doc, highlight and comment. All we want to know is how could this be 10% better? Right, so it's not overwhelming. It's not like what's wrong? Just how could this be 10% better? And what has been remarkable is the clarity that they bring. Right, because when you're writing something, you're nerding out about it, and frankly, you're overthinking it. You're overthinking it. You try to get too cutesy, you try to get too clever, you try to get too fancy because you're trying to impress other writers instead of actually reach your readers. And so that has been game-changing in catching areas where we're confusing, contradictory, or what have you, before it's too late. So to me, the point of the focus group is not to have your point of view, is not to say, well, actually caring adults don't make that big of a difference. Well, you're welcome to that opinion, but I don't agree with you. That's my point of view. A book needs to have a point of view. But rather, what is not clear? What is confusing? Where did I lose you? Where are you not getting it?
Love it, man. Love it. This is great feedback. And I was actually just writing down like a whole list of follow-up questions. So how big is the chunk that you share with them?
So typically like one chapter. Yeah.
Got it.
And not more than one chapter, because now, like I said, we got 75 people in the focus group, which means I expect maybe like a fifth of them to reply each time we spoon feed them something. Right. And that's why I kind of went for a bigger number instead of like 3 people, is because these people have lives. It's not like I'm paying them full time. We will kind of send them gifts, a little Starbucks card, a little this and that, just to show our appreciation. But, I'm only going to assume like a fifth of them are going to respond or reply, or have some meaningful feedback on it. Got it.
Now, are you sending them one Google Doc that they're all commenting in, or is it separate docs?
It is a collective doc, and to be honest, I don't know if that's the smartest thing, because I wonder if so far I'm liking it. You can see a little bit of like someone's comment kind of, but sometimes you'll also be like, you'll see 5 people say, I agree with John's critique of that. Like, I agree. So you go, okay, it's not just John and he's weird and he's a few nuts short of a bunch and he doesn't get that part. It's like, okay, like if 5 level-headed reasonable human beings don't get what I'm trying to say there, I need to make that more clear.
Got it. Now, couple more follow-up questions. How do you get people interested in joining the focus group, and kind of like what's in it for them? And then lastly, what's the biggest impact or change that you've seen in how you write a book using it this way versus how you did it with the first book?
Well, let me answer the second question first. So doing it this way, like the idea of writing a dozen books in my lifetime, no problem. Isn't intimidating at all whatsoever, because I'm doing it in a way in which plays to my strengths, that I'm a visionary and an editor. If you can give me something decent, I can make it great. If you give me something blank canvas, I will cry and then wet myself and then quit. I just can't. That's not my strength. And so because I'm playing in my strength, like yes, it's still tricky. Yes, there's still days like I'm burnt on the book and I don't want to think about it anymore, and all of that's going to happen. But that happens less, because I'm playing to my strengths, and thus I'm reinforcing to myself like, hey, that was a pretty good experience. I'm going to want to do that again, instead of, when I did it just me, it was so excruciating and horrible and terrible. I was like, I'm never, ever, like never for any reason or any amount of money going to do that again. Now, to answer your first question, how do you get people involved in that? So for me, I have the luxury that currently I have a bit of a platform. I have an odd, I have a good size email list, a decent Facebook and Twitter following, and this sort of thing. So I have a little bit of a luxury there. Now, let me answer that question. If I didn't have any of that, like if I had 10 followers on Twitter or whatever, I would just reach out to my circle of influence. So, if I was just getting started in the education space, or the business space or the cooking space, or insert your space here, I probably know 10 people that are friends or an uncle or a family member. I would reach out to them, and if they're interested, then I would ask them to maybe recruit just one other person. Hey, do you know one other person that could be helpful with this? I would have, and I would think maybe some people would disagree, but I am careful not to put other Joshes, meaning other people that do what I do, in that focus group. Okay, so I wouldn't go, like I have a good handful of friends that are folks that kind of do similar things to me, to what I do. But I would not go and recruit those sorts of folks, because though that would be good for my ego, of like, oh, Chandler likes my book, or, this person that's cool and I admire likes my book. I'm not writing the book for that person. That they are not the reader. And if I spend my time trying to, impress them or make an impact on them or make it clear to them, it's going to be at the detriment of my actual reader, of my actual audience.
That's fantastic advice. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make. This is especially popular in academic writing, or with educators. Is like you go to get feedback, and I've just seen so many dreams crushed by this from people who said, hey, I sent this to other people to get their feedback, and who was it? Is my peers. Well, right. Especially if you're in the education space, like how many times is it, are those people negatively incentivized to give you good feedback? Because they might disagree with your point of views. They might have other point of views. They might not want you to succeed. They're not your target reader, right? So I think that's such a great message there, is only never take advice from anyone who's not your target reader, because anything that you tell you doesn't matter.
Yeah, begin to rip off Stephen Covey, begin with the reader in mind. Think about kind of that, I just think of like, is this going to be clear to some random dad in Iowa and some, random teacher in St. Louis? Like, she's who I'm writing the book for. It doesn't matter, and it's a distraction and a drug, frankly, to get drunk on. Are my peers and contemporaries going to be impressed or moved by what I'm doing? A couple more things I want to hit on the artsy stuff. I'm just taking over this interview, by the way.
Let's do it.
I'm just taking over. There's probably a handful of you guys out there that you might find yourself in a situation like me, where the buyer, so my first book was for teenagers. Most of the folks buying that book were parents, teachers, caring adults. So I could imagine a few other situations where the buyer of your book is not actually the reader of your book. So kind of a little thing that I've learned through that process is that the title and the subtitle, so for me, I'm going to say grown-ups versus kids. Grown-ups buy the book, kid ends up reading that book. Title, subtitle for the grown-up, meaning the buyer. The blurb and description for the grown-up, AKA my buyer. And then the artwork and the content is for the kid. Because, if you're writing books for kids or young people or whatever, and particularly if it's nonfiction, you're trying to sort of impart a healthy, positive idea. You got to put yourself in that mom or dad's shoes, right? It's like, okay, you're kind of asking my trust to talk to my kid, to influence my kid, to kind of, and if you do that well, not only will your book sell well, but frankly, you will be a gift to that parent, because you can say something in a creative, different way, or through a story or through a thing that's something that's important for that parent to pass on to their kid. But, because they're the parent, they're not always going to listen to them. So I always think title, subtitle, blurb, and description for the buyer, and then the art and the content for the actual kid. Of course, that's not, it doesn't apply if your buyer is your reader, but from time to time you might find yourself in that situation. Last little nerdy thing. Do you have a follow-up on that, good sir?
Well, let's keep rolling with that, and then we'll move into more of the monetizing side.
Beautiful. Last thing I found helpful when I'm thinking about, you can have an idea for a book and you go, man, parenting teenagers or influencing teenagers. You look it up and you go, there's like 11,000 books on that topic. Why would anyone listen to me? How can I say anything fresh? Blah, 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 blah. But I mean, the obvious point is that you're going to have a unique point of view. You're going to have a unique sort of angle on it. But for me, practically what I found most helpful is going on Amazon, pulling up the top 25 of those books in your category and reading the 3-star reviews. The 5-star people are fanboys. The 1-star people are angry at the world and were never hugged as children. But the 3-star people the review is often, it was a great book. However, it left out this, or it was a great book, but it wasn't as practical and step-by-step as I hoped. And so I can find, I just find when I'm looking at writing in a new category, studying some of those 3-star reviews, you can really find sort of those gaps. And the goal is not find a gap and then sort of manipulate and lie to yourself to fill that gap. It's identify, okay, what are the 3 or 4 gaps in this space? And which of those is like in my wheelhouse anyway? And for me, a lot of the research I found is some of these books are philosophically great, not as practical step-by-step. I go, hey, I'm that guy. I can do that. Let's write that book.
Love it. Any other things on the writing side before we move into the monetizing side?
No, I think we're good there.
Those are tons of great tips. Now, we were chatting a little while back, and you said you've sold how many copies of that first book?
I think approaching 500,000.
Wow. So let's start to get into that, and I want to talk about, we could touch briefly on the marketing side
Sure.
and what you've done to sell all of those books, but then really what impact has that had on what you do from a business level and from growing your business. So let's kind of zoom in for the first part. About 500,000 copies of those books. How have those been sold? What have been the most effective things from a marketing standpoint that you've done to move books?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have a unique angle on this in that, my platform, which is now fairly sizable in sort of the space that I operate in, parents, teachers, caring adults. My platform indeed can move a good number of copies of a book or of a new product that's sort of appropriate for that category. But to be honest, I think a lot of the tactics and the strategies, and I'm all for them and I'm all about it, are helpful. But I think the best thing to year after year, decade after decade, sell, thousands of copies a month is just a freaking outstanding book. Now, which to me is, you'll hear my OCD in that focus group, right? You see me like twitching and getting excited. And that's part of it, is that, because my goal is not to write something that is helpful for a year or makes money for a year, I want to write something that's helpful for decades. and makes money for decades. That's the reason for the focus group. Not just because I'm OCD, but that's part of it. But because, if you approach it with that viewpoint of this is something I want to be proud of for decades, this is something I want to be helpful for decades, this is something I want to be a stream of income in my business for decades that could be worth hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to my business. If I said, you're going to make $1 million with your book, think about how soberly you would approach that. Think about how thoughtful, careful, intentional you would be about making that as good as you possibly can. So when I say, an outstanding book, outside of the things that we would all think of, to me, what comes to mind is the book should be evergreen and timeless. So I try to be careful about, writing about MySpace, right? I mean, if I write about MySpace in a book a couple of years ago, well, now it's gone. So I want to be, and all of those are things that work great in speeches and seminars, like, hey, damn Daniel, like that's funny, or that's like a pop culture reference or like a thing, and you can make a point out of it, and that's terrific. But if you put those in a book, it's just going to date it. It can make it feel out of touch. It can make it feel not relevant. And that's hard because some of the more timely pop culture oriented stuff is just right there. And it just tells you, hey, grab a hold of this and stick it in the book. The other kind of way I think about it is helpful and prescriptive. Now, obviously, I'm talking about nonfiction books, but helpful and prescriptive. I think about a couple recent books that have performed very well. One of these gentlemen I know you're having on, there's The Miracle Morning. I think of that as prescriptive and helpful. I think of The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up as helpful and prescriptive. It's like there's a prescription. It's like, you want to do a thing, here's the benefits of it, here's why I did it, here's other people that did it, now here's the prescription. Like, here's handles. Like there's this thing, and now you're putting handles on the idea so people can grab it, carry it, make sense of it, apply it to their own life. And when your book is helpful and prescriptive, that is 10x the most brilliant marketing tactics you can think of. Because now they've applied it to their life, they've seen results, and you can't shut them up. You can't stop them from not buying a dozen copies and giving it to folks, back to school or graduation or whatever the relevance is for your book. So really being helpful and prescriptive, I think is so helpful. The challenge is being prescriptive causes you to make difficult decisions, right? Like if I said, all right, so Chandler, here are the 3 non-negotiables would grilling salmon, right? It's like, who am I to really say what the 3 are? But you got to have a point of view. You got to say, there's lots of things you could focus on with salmon. I think these 3 matter, right? And that takes courage by me to have the guts to do well, first it causes me to respect you, the reader, because I should be cautious and careful and do my research and try cooking the salmon at home first and, try 50 different approaches and then define these are the 3 and then boldly declare those. And then you'll try it and you're like, this is amazing that, I impress these people and I'm winning friends and influencing people with salmon. So there you go. The 7 habits of highly effective salmon. All rights reserved.
All right, there we go. Coming soon to a store near you. So let's so we talked about writing a good book. We talked about being prescriptive. How do you recommend, and what's been successful for you for giving the book the spark that gets it into people's hands so that it can be spread? And what's been effective for you, and then what's been the most effective thing long term? Because 500,000 copies of a book, like if I'm sitting here watching this, I'm thinking, Josh, that's awesome, and I'll write a good book, but like, how the hell do I sell this thing? Right. So what would be your recommendation there?
Okay, so long term, and long term, the answer is not easy. And sorry in advance. Long term, in my opinion, my point of view, as the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Salmon, not a real book, people, don't go try to buy it. It's 2 things. It's number 1, intentionally building a platform in the space that you're writing a book. Intentionally building a platform. And at first, your platform is going to start off as minuscule and not fancy and not impressive, but being committed long-term to that space so that it continues to grow, it continues to increase, and then that book is naturally right there as new people, as new salmon enthusiasts find it. And then the second is just, as I said, writing an outstanding book that's prescriptive, that's genuinely helpful. Long term, that's it, because my platform can indeed, and anyone's platform, regardless of how small or large, can indeed kickstart a book very well, can indeed give it a great first 3, 6, 9 months. But if you're not consistent in building your platform and therefore consistent in marketing, and the book isn't good, it's going to, worst case, teeter off, best case, level off. Now, as far as that kickstart, I'm sure many people much smarter than me will share other techniques. For me, a couple that I found very helpful is, the Amazon page where the book is listed. Like if you Amazon Teens Guide to World Domination, that's the first book I wrote for teens. That Amazon page intentionally reads as a sales page, right? So if your book is traditionally published and you think, oh, you're dealing with smart New York people, they're gonna like write it the best. That Amazon page is gonna be unbelievable. It's gonna be lame. It's just going to be descriptive, not persuasive. And if you're self-publishing your own book, you just might be like, hey, I just need to, kind of put like the description from the back cover of it. I want you to think of that Amazon page, that Barnes & Noble page, that whatever, as a sales page, which means, you guys are watching this thing. You've opted into pages, you've seen offers, you've visited sales pages. You think about those sales pages that are persuasive. There's a headline that isn't about the author. It's about them, the reader, the benefit, what they're going to get. There's testimonials. There's social proof. There's kind of bullet points, that's easy to scan on kind of what are the benefits. Now, of course, if you're selling like, a $1,000 weekend, seminar or course or something, of course you're going to do those things, but I would argue you should do the same thing for your $15 book. Is think of that Amazon page truly as a sales page and put as much effort and intentionality as you would in that. The next thing is reviews on Amazon. Of course, that is incredibly helpful. That's a great place to circle back to your focus group, right? So those 75 folks in my focus group, that's not even counting like a book launch team, which I know you teach, but even just that focus group, in those first couple days that your book launches, getting those reviews on there so people feel safe, so people know, that this isn't, that it's trustworthy, that it's a thing, that this is like other people are buying this or reading this or believe in this or whatever. It's like if you were looking for a restaurant, you're visiting some town looking for a restaurant, you're not going to go to the place with 2 reviews. It may be the best place in town, but in your gut, you're like, that place must suck because it's only got 2 reviews. Doesn't mean it does, but you assume such. I think you need to be very smart on the category you place it in Amazon. You need to do what's good for your business, not your ego. Okay, I won't say his name, but I was mentoring this young guy, and he had this TED Talk that blew up he shared very candidly his story on depression. But it was kind of like a weird thing for him of like, I don't want to be the depression guy, right? I don't want to, I'm more than that. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a this and that. I don't want to be that guy. So he's like, I just want it to be in the memoir category. I don't want it in there with those depression people in the mental health category. It's weird. That's a terrible decision for that book because that book was about mental health and depression. It was done in indeed an artistic, unique, fresh, compelling way, which would have been even more so a gift in that category. Because most of the mental health and depression books, like you read them, and even if you don't have clinical depression prior, then you have after by just reading the book. It's so dry and terrible. So I think you need to be smart and sober about what categories you place a book in, so that discoverability is good.
Love it. Those are all great tips. Now we'll take the final time that we have together and talk about the back end for you for your books. So 500,000 copies, it's a lot of books. What has that meant to you and your business, and kind of how do you go from that first, like someone gets your book, to investing in your business? Like how do they further that path with you, and what does that look like? And how have you really seen these books influence your business and grow your business?
Yeah, I mean, those books without question have influenced my business. I mean, not only on the authority and credibility side. Again, I know I keep harping on this, but also the substance of the book, right? Because the easy bumper sticker thing to say is writing a book makes you an expert. And that's not false, but writing a book makes you a perceived expert. And then when I open the book, I will indeed determine if you're an expert, right? By the substance, by the was it helpful? Did it make me think? Did it make me laugh, if that was the point? Did it make me forget about my troubles for a couple hours? And so I know I harp on that, and I'm all about being strategic, and I'm all about savvy marketing and this and that. But that's going to really establish you as a credibility, as an authority, as an expert in your space, which is going to grow whatever you decide to do. I mean, back when I first wrote that book, we didn't have curriculum in schools. We didn't have a summer camp for teenagers. We didn't, I wasn't training other speakers in the youth space. Kind of none of that more sophisticated business model was fleshed out. So to me, throughout the book, there is essentially a book URL. Meaning I give each book a URL where they can download templates, resources, scripts, etc. And so for that teen book, it was heyjosh.com. So throughout the book, it would be like, just go to heyjosh.com and you'll get this, or we'll send you this, or you'll get updated on this. So that not only are you capturing that information if you indeed have a back-end business model in place, but if you're like, I know I need to have a back-end business model in place, but I need some time to figure out what the heck that's going to be, well, so be it. You're at least capturing the interest of those folks that believe in what you're doing enough, believe in the message and your space enough to have spent 10, 15, 20 bucks with you. And again, if you provide value, I believe it's this, if I give you 15 bucks and you honor my 15 bucks with a good book, then you're going to have a customer for life. Because I'm going to go, guys, $15 thing blew my mind. What about that $100 thing, or that $500 thing, or that whatever that escalation process looks like. But for me, it's definitely, having those kind of mile markers throughout the book where people can, scripts, templates, kind of whatever's most appropriate for the type of book that you're doing.
Got it. Now, what would your, I guess two follow-up questions that, what would be your advice to someone who they know they need the back end, right? But they don't have it yet. What would be your advice to them? And then also, what does that escalation look like for you? Like, what is that? You said, whether it's $100 thing or $5, like, what does that look like for you? And how do they move from the book to that?
Yeah. So if you know you need the back end, but you're not sure exactly what to do, to me, I would, what you can do indeed is capture the information of the people that are reading your book, text this number to get this thing, or, go to this sort of vanity book URL to get this thing. And then you can survey those folks. You can ask those folks. You can think of a couple things that, maybe there's a couple ideas that you have and you're like, I got 3 ideas of like maybe a next product or a product that's a little bit more substantial and where I can be more helpful, but I could do all 3. I'm not sure which one I should start with. Ask those folks. Or if you're not sure exactly, you could ask them something as simple as, what's your number one problem? What's your number one hope in this space? And, how do you best learn? Is it like live events? Is it, digital learning? Is it video? Is it audio? And then you can kind of take a look at that. And instead of trying to, think you're super clever and you can somehow, like Miss Cleo, read the mind of your buyers, simply ask them and go, okay, where does their need meet my skill set and what I know I'm confident in delivering anyway. And then the escalation process, for us now, it's a little bit more sophisticated in the sense that when someone opts into our stuff, our first objective is to find out, are they a parent, a teacher, or a caring adult? And then, if they're a parent, we kind of have some training and then sort of products that are appropriate and a good fit for that crowd. And that crowd has a particular, sort of price elasticity and threshold and these sorts of things. But then if they're a teacher and a caring adult, we kind of send them in this way. So there's kind of a fork in the road. And then depending on whether they say, I'm a parent or I'm a teacher or a caring adult, we kind of send them this way. The interesting thing is, check this out. We have this curriculum. I've mentioned it a couple times. So that curriculum's it's $19 a month, and about 2,200 schools worldwide use this curriculum. But also that same curriculum, parents buy to give to their teenager. However, remember the sort of the fork in the road. Though it's the same product, essentially, we sell it in 2 different ways, right? Because if you're a teacher, I need you to see a success story of this guy Chandler, who's a high school teacher in San Diego, who's using this like on Fridays to have important life skills conversations with the kids in his classroom. So I need to show you people like you using this, getting benefit from it. I need to explain to you, hey, here's how you could use it in your classroom or your youth group or your Boy Scout troop or whatever, though it's the same product. And then similarly with the parents. So, we try to think, to me, it comes down to really respecting the customer in that, I want to put myself in their shoes. I want to think, how can I make this clear to them? How can I prove to them beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is going to be helpful to them and relevant to their situation?
Love it. All right. Final question for me. And that is, what would be your parting tip, parting piece of advice for someone who's thinking about writing a book? Maybe they've already started it, or they're just, they're kind of just in the process. Like, what would be your parting tip that you feel like would be helpful for them?
Don't think that there's something broken in you and that it's only difficult for you. Anyone who you admire, or anyone who's crossed that goal line or, achieved anything significant, there is inevitably a period of time where you hate it. You think it's not going to work. You think you're incompetent, you're incapable, it's not worth it. That is natural. That is part of the process. That's why, if you ask 10 people, do you want to write a book? All of them would say, oh yeah, of course I do. But only 5 of them actually will, or maybe only 4 of them actually will. It's not because they lack the talent or the ability. It's because it's so easy to question yourself in those moments that are difficult. And as a guy who's written a couple books, as a guy who's failed hundreds of times and done things well a couple dozen times, that's part of it. That is part of it. That is, there is indeed prestige and, there is prestige in writing a book, and there is a sense of accomplishment in writing a book. But that icky period is the price tag for that. So you're going to be all right, buddy.
Love it. Love it. Great advice, great tips. And not just there, but throughout this interview. Josh, thank you so much for coming on. Where just as we leave, where can people go to find out more about you, your books, and what you're up to?
Yep. So my primary website is Josh Shipp. That's SHIPP, joshshipp.com. All the goodness and glory is there.
Awesome. Josh, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Come on.